We're delighted to be joined today by our client, Carol Koffman. Carol is the Head of Performance Management for Standard Bank Group, and Carol will take us through her transformation journey and how she moved her organisation from a much more traditional approach to a whole new mindset and approach to managing performance. As always, we love to keep these sessions interactive, so please post your comments or your questions into the chat and we'll make sure that they're answered. Now, I'm going to hand over to Aisling to kick off the session.
Hello, everybody, and a big welcome to Tandem Talks. I'm really delighted to have Carol with us here today. And I think for any of you who know her, you'll know she's one of the progressive visionaries in the performance management space. She's such a vision and ambition for what she wants to do in performance management. And the transformation journey that she's undertaken, you'll see as we go through the presentation, is super impressive. The time frame by which she did it, how she brought everybody on the journey. And I think it's just a masterclass in how to transform performance management. So we're really excited, and thank you for being here today with us, Carol. We're really delighted to have you. And without further ado, we're going to hand over to you for the next 20 minutes or so and to go through the presentation. And of course, a reminder to all of the audience, please do bring your comments and your questions. We'll cover them at the end of Carol's presentation when I'll come back in and facilitate a Q&A and a conversation with all of you, our community. So thanks for joining us, and over to you, Carol.
Great. Thanks so much, Aisling, for such a lovely welcome. And thanks for having me to share our experiences in Standard Bank. And just to ring-fence some of the talking points, I thought I'd prepare a couple of slides and start off with how we see performance management. So if we can go to the slide, please. The next one. Right, I think it's quite important to start with how we think about performance management, because everybody understands it very, very differently and conflate the system that enables performance management practices with the actual engagement of performance, which is how people are mobilized. And then they also confuse it with the actual processes, which is what sits at the back end, what pushes those experiences so that there is some kind of a workflow from start to end. And those are three very, very different points of reference when we are talking about performance management. So it's very important for us at the onset to be clear about what we're talking about here. So let's go to my next slide, please. Right. I'd like to start off with just defining broad heading around whether your approach that you want to undertake is what we call evolutionary. So a next step, what is the next level for us kind of approach versus a revolutionary approach, which is changing the whole process in every way, from practices to the technology enablement, right through to the processes which are underpinned by the workflow. And those are three, as I said, those could all be revolutionary, or you could just change one part of it, which is just the experience of it enabled by the technology. So for Standard Bank, it was very much the technology piece, but I'll get to it in a moment. But that first bullet that I have there was that the reason why we wanted to change the technology piece was because we wanted to also change the way people experience performance management, how they were engaged. And then we wanted to make the shift from it being about actual evaluation, management side of it, or the review process, and more to the continuous learning and the improvement, because we are moving into a future-ready organization, and that doesn't happen overnight. It has to happen through having a learning mindset, or whatever everybody calls a growth mindset, acquire skills that you can only acquire through on the ground, tried and tested, through engagement on projects. And you wanted to bring that into your learning as well as seeing progress. And the best place to do that is through the performance management practices. So that was the first piece. It was revolutionary only insofar as it changed the way people experienced our practices through the technology. And the next piece was that we are very clear that you don't use performance management when things are tough, when people are not delivering to expectations. So because of you've realized they're not the right fit, or you have issues with the way that they might show up. If it's about the behaviors that were identified in the performance contract, so for example, behaviors, then they belong in the performance contract. But if it's about style or personality, or if conduct issues, conduct and behavior very often are also correlated. If it's about the relationships or difficulties they have with managers' style, often that becomes gets lumped together with everything performance. And erroneously, for better or for worse, people then tend to use a performance management process to iron out those issues. And it's very, very clear for Standard Bank that that's not what performance management is. It's not a punitive process. It is not to get rid of people, but it is really about mobilizing our people in the actual flow of work to unlock the value that they bring in their individual ways, through their individual roles, their individual mandates, unique strengths and approaches they bring, and how we use that through the performance management process. And the manager is both as the conduit for that, and bring our strategy to life. Right, so that was the second piece. And then another big piece for us as part of the revolutionary piece is that we really see performance management at Standard Bank as doing two things simultaneously. One is it connects people to the bigger purpose of the organization. So our strategy, our strategic focus areas, what we measure as value from the perspective of our clients, our shareholders, our partners. But at the same time, it is also about how people engage from the perspective of what is in it for me. If I set goals, if I track my goals regularly, are they meaningful goals? How do they get recognized? How do I get feedback? Is it in line with what my manager is getting measured on, etc.? And will I get rewarded for what I deliver? Do I see the connection, that and recognition, and all of the other things about what in terms of what is expected and what success looks like for the organization as a whole? So those are both important for us. And for some, that might seem revolutionary, but for us, that's part of the evolutionary part of it. It's our starting block. You have to have that in order to start making the performance management process real and meaningful. So so for me, it's important in this space with this audience also, my ask of you is just to be clear about where are you? Are you on an evolutionary path, which is what is your next step in your performance management practices, processes, or enablement? Or do you want to revolutionize them?
Carol, I'm just going to pause us there for a second because we are struggling a little bit with your sound quality. I know you've got load shedding there. It's not your line, but perhaps we could do video off and see if that helps with the quality of the sound. Thank you.
We'll do that. Okay, let's see how that goes.
Yeah, it's already sounding a little bit better. All right, let's try this. All right, sorry, everybody, for the sound quality. Hopefully we will get there. And of course, it is worth the getting through these quality issues to hear more. So over to you, Carol.
Great. Okay, so for Standard Bank, the reason why we needed to make this shift was that we had a direct request from both our people and the business for 4 key pieces that we needed to start bringing into our performance management. And that was the fact that the first one there, the increased demand for remote and virtual working because of the pandemic, but also because that's the way of work that we are seeing, and that I think is more of a future way of working anyway. Because of the hybrid nature of work and the global nature of work, we're going to see more and more remote and virtual working. And so we needed to have a technology and a tool that will help us to connect teams more effectively so that they maintain their productivity and that we don't lose the connection between people. That was the first piece. The second was that people wanted more continuous feedback as they're learning, and they wanted their learning to be realized in their performance goals, and they wanted to track that as part of their performance. And so to have a tool that could coach them on how they're doing with and track their learning in a practical way through their goals, and having their managers support that process was something that we really needed that we wanted to see and bring into the process. The third piece that we wanted to do was also to allow teams to have multidisciplinary and cross-functional team goals, not just individual goals, and that they could give feedback across these different types of teams and also deliver solutions at speed for our clients and help our clients and partners grow, but also manage their own progress and recognize team members no matter where they are in the organization. Standard Bank is a global entity. We have teams sitting everywhere in the world, in Africa, and also hybrid teams remotely and virtually, all working together as teams. So our management approach and everything about it had to support. And lastly, the shift of our organization to becoming more than a bank and in fact a platform provider. We wanted to make sure that the goals that people set are actually aligned to where the organization is going, and that they see what value they deliver through their own individual goals and their team goals, and that they always see that and have a view of it, so that we track and measure what we actually do. Those things get closer to each other. Is the sound better, Ashley?
Yes, yeah, it's improving. We still miss maybe every 10th word or so, but I think it's much improved from when your camera was on. So
right.
Keep going.
All right, the next slide. Right. One of the first things we did was, before we started the rollout of our new Tandem technology enablement, was we had to set a number of guidelines so that we don't get off track, and that we keep ourselves honest, and that we make sure that that we maintain the momentum, and that we do what we intended to deliver through the project. That was important because we had very limited time, and we were actually implementing my Tandem solution at the same time that our performance management practices were running. So it was a very ambitious task, but we knew we could do it, and our Tandem assured us that they could do it, which I thought was, I thought to myself, I have to see this one. And we jumped into the process knowing that we had a partner who knew that they could do it, and that they would partner with us, and that they wouldn't let us down. So one of the first things so just to say that before I go into the principle, that we actually delivered the entire system, the whole technology piece, in a matter of 8 weeks. Now that's unheard of. We've never done that, and I haven't heard of any other organization that has done that. We implemented it, and people could kick off their goal setting at the start of the year, and through our goal setting process. But what was quite important for us was that we realized as we were going through the process and we were reflecting on lessons learned and what we did well, that these 6 principles that we had set at the onset were actually the reasons why implementation was successful. The first of them was that we were very clear that we were not changing our philosophy, our performance called Perform to Grow, which is what underpins our performance management approach. Our practices did not change, our processes did not change, nor did our rating descriptors. We actually have world-class performance management philosophy, in my opinion. And it was very clear also to spell out to people that the system is not our performance management approach. Again, this is one of the things that get conflated by many people that think the system is what is their performance management philosophy, and it's not. It has to enable it. No technology partner is going to tell you how to do performance management. They need to know from you, what do you want to do and how do you want to use our tool, and does your tool help you do that? So that was, and that we communicated to our group. So that already allayed a lot of anxiety because people knew that we weren't changing the core of our performance management approach. What we did do, and as what I already said, was that we simplified our processes and the practices. And that's partly why we use the technology, because simplification is what's at the core of an engaged workforce in the performance management journey. If they know how to do it, if it's enabled through the day-to-day work experience, if it's accessible from any tool that they work on, then they're going to do it. And they mustn't go digging for where to give feedback or how to track their goals or how to recognize their teammates. It has to be very, very accessible in their day-to-day work. So that's simplification, accessibility, and enablement in the flow of work were principles that really helped us to stay honest when we dealt with what features in the solution would we adopt, how would those features look like, etc. So it really helped to expedite discussions and gain consensus on to implement and how we wanted it to look. Third thing was that we did not do a big bang approach. In other words, we did not switch on all the functionalities at the same time. We phased it out based on what people would use at the time that they needed functionality. So, for example, we only switched on goal setting and feedback because we knew people would use that. And that was also at the start of our calendar year when we align our goals to the strategy of the organization. And as people got into the system, we started switching on all of the other functionalities very effortlessly, very seamlessly in the background, and use all of those new features as nudges, as calls to action, as exciting developments and part of our communications. The fourth piece there is that we also didn't do any complex tailoring of the system at the onset. We just implemented the most basic or vanilla features, and we left the customization to more of, once we knew people were using the system, that they could feel it out, they could see what worked for them and how they wanted it to work, because any changes that we could then make, any bespoke changes, would be with reference to what people had tested, what they had already used. And that was one of the most wonderful things about Tandem, is the flexibility it allows to make changes literally on the fly in production as you use it. So you don't have to be perfect when you implement. You just have to start, and you can see the improvements as you go along. So we opted for improvements rather than for perfection. And then the fifth point here is that we created a project board, which helped us to with difficult decisions. So people knew what they could vote on and what they could choose, and what we call a shape. So what they could shape. They also knew what they couldn't shape. So where there was already a decision made, so for example, on our fundamentals, and didn't want to change what was core to experience of simplicity and accessibility, where we felt there was a genuine impasse in the decision-making process, we would then escalate our project the decision. People were very happy about that. Someone else would make the decision, and knew that their concerns were addressed, and that it wasn't, no one's decision was trumped over another, and didn't have to have a majority decision-making approach, but that we could take a business view, and that another body could deal with these kind of decisions. That really, really helped with getting close sign-off and buy-in to the next steps. And then the last point there, the success indicator, is that we had every single representative body in our user acceptance testing, in our validation and design sessions, and also in our change and comm sessions and the training sessions where we wanted to share what was happening, and the lessons learned, and our implementation sessions. We had all of the different stakeholders represented. So we knew the design was led by our users, and was a truly led, people-led design, and not a systems-led design. Those were the principles. Thanks. Next slide. All right, so, this is just an example of how we phased throughout the rollout. We staggered it. As I said, took us in the first part of the year in time for goal setting, just to unveil that piece. The whole shell of Tandem was implemented. So everything you see from phase 1 to 3 was implemented as part of the whole Tandem technology suite, but we only switched on the tools and the features and the functionalities at the time when we knew people would use them, rather than overwhelm them with too many new things. And we wanted to unveil them layer by layer so that we could have the excitement and the anticipation, but we also wanted to ensure that there was rapid deployment, so not to wait until everything was done. And we wanted to ensure, as I said already, that through phasing out the approach of people getting their hands on the system, that they give their feedback, and that we build that feedback. And that was really, I'd say that for me was probably the single biggest reason why the project was so successful. Thank you for that. I think that's the last slide. Over to you, Aisling, for some questions. I see that there were still some issues with sound, but not.
Yeah. I'm hoping that now that we're not sharing and so on, that perhaps the sound might ease up a little bit on us. There was a bit of sound quality issues, and apologies for that, everybody, but it's not Carol's line. Unfortunately, there's a bit of load shedding where she is. But look, that didn't stop everybody from getting involved in the conversation, and there's lots of questions here to get started with. So let's get stuck in straight away. Thanks for the presentation. So Michelle asks, given that you didn't change fundamentals, but just the approach in a more dynamic and flexible way, what are you measuring specifically? Is it competences, MBO, or both?
So what are we measuring?
Measuring, yes. Yeah.
Right. The performance management our approach isn't the measurement tool. It's what connects the strategy to the people. Okay, so that's the other. The performance management approach in itself is not the measure. It's not the thing that you're measuring. So if you can't know where the organization is is prioritizing and where they're going and what they want to do, then you can't translate that into the goalposts and the guiding metrics for your people. So we had to make sure that the process of engaging your employees on what they're doing and how they're doing it had to connect with what was important to the organization, not just from a end-to-end annual cycle, but with the bigger picture in mind. Because you can't often see progress in only one calendar cycle. You have to see the bigger picture. And because what you need to do is look at what are all those efforts, those collective cumulative efforts of your entire organization. Now, in our case, it's 45,000 people globally. What are all those collective efforts or their goals contributing to, which is the bigger picture? So performance management is the tool that you're using to track strategy, to track where the organization is going. And if your performance management tool can't do that, then you have to ask yourself, then what is it doing? Then why do you have it? Do you just have it so that people can go in there and set goals for what? So that was the one piece. It had to connect with the bigger picture, the strategy. And then when people can see, this is what my organization is doing, this is what the organization is measuring, my goals need to contribute to that. I need to contribute to our group metrics, what we are measuring, and how we're going to measure our strategy. And then through the reporting functionality and the analytics that Tandem provided us, we then can measure how those collective goals all contribute to the strategy. So we could see if the efforts of our people are aligned to what the organization is measuring and valuing the perspective of our shareholders and our clients. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does to me. Ina has a question here, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Ina. She says, you mentioned that you simplified the processes and practices to make them part of day-to-day experience. Could you please give some examples of actions that managers and employees take daily as part of their performance management processes?
Okay. So, for example, just giving each other feedback. So because we are now working mostly virtually, remotely, people are working on Teams, presenting their work via Teams. You can give them feedback from Teams, drop them an email, and tell them how you felt about it. One of the nicest things about Tandem is that it has APIs already with many other tools that we are using in our daily business practices, like Outlook. Everybody works on Outlook. We use Microsoft. Outlook is one of the ways that people can get feedback. And so what Tandem has was a button that could sit right in your Outlook inbox. So you could go straight into Tandem from Outlook and give feedback, or ask for feedback, or copy and paste an email that somebody has given you around how they've experienced you. Add that as a feedback note on my Tandem. The other thing that was also very useful from a day-to-day perspective is that you could do your reflection notes, your conversations and your check-ins with your team members straight onto Tandem, and you can schedule those check-ins from Tandem, download them onto your Outlook. So you don't have to have your check-ins elsewhere and then do performance management on a different system. You can do both in the same place. And managers could have all the coaching notes, even nudges for coaching if they weren't sure how to approach a conversation. Nudges that just roll up and ask you what type of conversation do you want. These are some examples of conversation topics. These are some of the questions you can ask. And so that just made it so much easier to use the system, those data interactions.
Yeah, it was one of the points I think that we spoke at length about, is this concept that performance management shouldn't be something you do. It should be just embedded into your everyday and the way you work. So, you naturally give feedback in a very organic way. You never have to leave your email to do it. You naturally check in with your people. You don't need to go off documenting it somewhere else. So I think that the beauty of embedding it into everyday practices is the more people practice those things, the more they become familiar with them and easier with them. Because otherwise, if you have to log into a system and go and find a system to give someone feedback, it's all a bit too much, isn't it, to bother? So people don't tend to do it. Whereas if it's just at your fingertips, I think they're more likely to. Okay, Michelle has come back. She was the lady who asked the previous question, and she said she'd romantically agree with you, but they're asking every day to measure something, also matching with HR metrics, that it's imperative, that is becoming something more analytics. So you are fortunate not to work in a so oppressive work environment. Yes, indeed. Yeah, I think there is a lot of analytics though, Michelle,
Yes.
that you can pick up. I mean, you can see the whole leadership effectiveness metrics throughout, where you can see, is a manager actually spending the time coaching their people, delivering the experience that you want? Are they giving feedback? Do they have goals in their team? Are they checking in with their people regularly? And you can see that across your organization and kind of compare different locations on how they're doing with your employee experience versus other locations, or indeed different managers versus other managers, and so on. You can see who are your role model managers and who are the ones who are maybe not quite living up to the standard. So I think there's an awful lot of analytics you can take out of the experience, but it's a case of what's important to your top team.
Correct. Yeah. It's how you use it. So if I could just add to that, it wasn't that we were just doing reporting of performance metrics in the systems metrics for its own sake. Yes, you can do that. So to Ashling's point, we can at any point go into the My Tandem in the dashboard, and we can see the activity, the adoption stats. We can break it down in terms of the different business areas, countries, segments, work levels. So do managers log in or spend more time? Others, what type of goals people have? We could do all of that analytics at any given time. But again, how does it compare to what organizations measure and what they're valuing is the big question. So how do you use all of these stats and reporting to inform discussions where decisions are made about productivity, about realignment of goals, resource allocation, learning, compatibility, skills, all of those things. You can use the performance management data then in a more meaningful and strategic way. That was the point of all of this, was not just to have HR data about performance uptake or activity, but to have meaningful insights on how our people are engaging, what kind of goals they have, and how does that help us make different decisions and drive our strategy. If it doesn't do that, then why do you have it?
Yeah.
So I think that's a question to ask.
Yeah, for sure. Questions are piling in here, Carol. So I'm going to pace you up here. A question here from Charisse. Could you give an example of how you included learning as a goal?
Yeah. Well, we created different goal types. So for us, learning was a performance. It was actually not just a performance measure, but actually a group measure because of our future ready platform business that forms part of our strategy. So we wanted to incorporate it into learning types and to also bring our philosophy of perform to grow into the actual goal setting process. So we created a learning as a goal category, goal types. So business goals, we had a learning goal, and we also created a leadership goal applicable to leaders, because we see leadership as the driver of employee productivity. Employee productivity is the ultimate metric of people when it comes to workforce return on investment, calculated as a ratio of the organization's financial outcome and our financial growth and our overall performance. So we wanted to see the people component that and how learning unlocks more solutions, client solutions, better performance in every single other value driver that we have, where we measure our strategy, achievement of our strategy. So learning is one of those value drivers, and we want to bring it to the goals process itself. So it's there as an actual goal type. And then we
struggling with sound a little bit again, Carol. Sorry, the sound is breaking up a little bit on us. Yeah, I think unfortunately we'll have to lose video.
Yeah. So we also, through our API, the fact that Tandem has the APIs, we could link it to our own learning platform as well. So people have a link into our learning platform that we use, and they could link their learning to whatever learning goals that they have on our learner management system and our whole learner management approach. And also in the whole solution in My Tandem, we have turned some of our coaching nudges and our learning philosophies into little bits of learning inputs for people as they go through the cycle. So when they have check-ins, if it's around their career or succession planning, critical skills or certain future skills, they would have a nudge on that. And they could go to our learning platform and also see what we do around those, what kind of prompts we have, courses they can do around certain focus areas.
Okay, great. Okay, Verena is asking, how many employees and managers were influenced by this transformation?
Everyone. And we know that because we had a 99% adoption rate. And it was also the first time that we had our top executive involved in utilizing the system. And because they are measured against metrics that are now embedded in the performance management tool. They are using the tool to show what their people are doing, and the people themselves are using the tool to link their goals to their managers' goals. And all of that now shows the entire alignment, top to bottom up. So, for the first time, we're seeing a more holistic picture of how top leadership is being measured and how what they actually do. So it's allowed for a truly data-led conversations and decisions about what we focus on.
Yeah, it's probably, Verena, in case you missed it earlier in Carol's talk, she mentioned she's got 45,000 people across her group that she rolled out to. So it was quite a big scale project for her. We're losing you a little bit, Carol, here and there, but I'm going to keep going and we'll get through with this sound issue. Ina comments that she's using Workday and it's tough to use. Okay, yeah, we've lots of clients who are on Workday and kind of layered Tandem in as an additional experience for their people, so we can, because the two systems can talk to each other, so it's really easy to use one on top of the other. Annie says, okay, there's a comment here from Annie Bouton. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I unfortunately missed half of the presentation, and I wonder, how do teams set up and follow up team goals when check-ins and discussions are often between manager and one direct report? We have been thinking about this in our team, but could not find a good process for this. Thanks. I'm not sure I 200% understand the question there, unless you got it, Carol.
I was also just going to say, I'm not sure what the question part is.
Yeah, you might get back to us, Annie, on that one, maybe just to clarify what the question is. I'm going to move on in the interest of time. So Liam asks, have you incorporated your values into these conversations? And if so, how?
Okay. Again, our values was actually embedded again into the performance management system, so that people could link their goals to what behaviors would enable them to show up and deliver those goals in the way that is expected. And the reason for that is because in our Perform to Grow philosophy, we talk a lot about it's not just about what you do, but also how you do it. So you don't just get given feedback on whether you achieve a particular goal, but also how you showed up with regards to your behaviors. And if those behaviors were very clearly identified at the onset of the goal, it was easy for people also to give you feedback on it, because people could link a particular behavior to a piece of feedback that they might want to give. We have very clear descriptors in the system that unpacks what that behavior looks like. So it was very easy for people to always have the behaviors top of mind when they were engaging on their goals or giving people feedback on their goals.
Okay. And Verena asked, somebody said, I think I must have missed this one. Verena asked, which trainings do you provide to managers? Do you see that conversations are increasing? So she possibly meant, trainings beyond the technology. Did you give,
Yes. Yeah, so as I said, we rolled out the phases in a staggered approach. So when we rolled out the goal setting and the feedback functionalities in Tandem, what we had like learning sessions where the focus wasn't on Tandem as such. It was a refresher on our philosophy and our fundamentals. So again, when we did the goal setting module, we said, what is it about goal setting that's important? And the one piece was that it had to link to learning, that it was a leadership effectiveness piece for leaders, but it also was an opportunity for us to share the organizational goals with relevance to the metrics of the organization, what our value drivers were. And then we said, by the way, all of that in. So we always coupled the new features and introduction of how to do it on Tandem with pressure on what the philosophy of performance is and where the organization is going and how they can engage with that in a practical way through. So we had many these webinar sessions, and we use our learning partners, our learning teams to help us design that. We use our social media platforms within the Standard Bank group, so we could put bite-sized chunks of information, and we could have webinar sessions of an hour over lunchtime, and we had videos, how-to guides, etc. So we came at it in a multi-pronged way, and we just gave people many different ways of interacting with the content, not just one way. So it was the videos, the Yammer campaigns, the webinars, the how-to guides, and then we also used our intranet where people could access information as they were browsing it and doing it.
Great, good stuff. So the reason Sive has appeared is usually to wrap us up, because it means our time is up. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get through all the questions. There was so much interest in what you're doing and how you're doing it. So apologies for those of you who we didn't get to answer the questions. We will try and follow up after the webinar to try and capture these questions. If Adam, if you can capture some of these questions here on my right and who they're coming from, we will aim to follow up with you after the webinar to try and answer as many questions as we can. But for now, I'm going to say a huge thank you to you, Carol, and apologies that we've struggled with sound throughout. But one of those technology things, isn't it, that sometimes you can't plan for. All the best planning in the world doesn't allow for. But I thought it was a really engaging presentation. It was super to see the incredible transformation that you've pulled off there in a mere 8 weeks. I mean, it's outstanding to 45,000 people, and to be able to claim that transformation, I think, is just something to be really proud of. So thank you so much for sharing your story and how you went about it with us. We really appreciate you being here. So thanks very much. And I'm going to hand back over to Sive now.
Great, thank you so much. So thank you so much, Carol, for your time today and telling us more about your story. And Aisling, thank you so much for moderating and getting through all those questions. We'll ensure that we capture them all and come back to everyone to make sure that you've clarity of them, and other interactive sessions. So thank you all so much. To stay in touch and to learn more about kind of our next series, we have fantastic speakers on a monthly basis. Follow us on LinkedIn and we'd love to keep you informed. But thank you all so much and we'll speak soon.